what would you suggest to them to help them even start the process and what they should be doing to plan for that exit in the long run?
Yeah, and when I started this, one of the questions people would ask is, "Oh, you're going to help them find a buyer? Do you match buyers and sellers?" And it is something that eventually I think we will layer on. But today, when you look at all the data, we've had thousands of people come through our platform. Almost 90% of small business owners have no plan as to when, why, and how they want to exit their business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a different analogy, but it's like showing up at a financial advisor's office saying, "All right, I want to retire next year. What do I need to do?" Well, it's going to be really tough. So the things that we offer today are generally focused around an exit plan.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Eric, a pioneer in webcasting, began his career by selling technology to those without sound cards and speakers for their computers at broadcast.com. After the Yahoo acquisition, he spent 17 years in Silicon Valley, contributing to numerous venture-backed startups in various leadership roles. Eric's extensive experience led him to establish ExitGuide, aiming to democratize the business exit process for small, Main Street business owners. Entrepreneurs can learn from his journey about navigating the tech industry's evolution, leading startups, and the importance of simplifying complex processes for broader accessibility in the business world. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Candy. It's great to be here. I look forward to our chat.
Me too. But before I get into questions I have for you on the topic, I would love for you to share your story of how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I was thinking about this, and it started probably in college. I borrowed $500 from my dad and printed up a bunch of T-shirts and was selling them door to door in the dorms. And I think I got in trouble a couple times. People didn't know what to do, but definitely a don't ask for permission, go and do. And through college, I ended up creating different T-shirt products and doing other kind of side hustles, which helped me buy a car. I did pay my dad back, if I recall correctly. It was quite some time ago. And after college, I worked in politics for a little bit, which is another story. But walked into a warehouse in downtown Dallas in Deep Ellum, and they had this vision for selling webcasting over the internet, and I just the idea just struck me, and it was early days of the internet. And I think it was just being able to jump into something that someone was creating that did not exist. And just, I guess, the freedom. I was probably too young and not mature enough to really realize what I was striving for, and maybe selling, T-shirts door to door in college. But it was probably, my first foray into it, and it just kind of lit a fuse.
Perfect. Well, I always love to just kind of hear the backstory. It's a lot of us have become entrepreneurs without planning to. Some purposely did, so I think it's always fun to hear, like, how did we get started? And that leads into kind of where we are now, too. So obviously you did create this company, ExitGuide, and you're helping entrepreneurs with that process. And so many don't ever even think about it, really. They start a business, they're doing their thing, and they don't actually even think of what they should be doing for, the plan in the long run. So I would love for you first to even talk about, like, why is it important to even start thinking about that so early on, not waiting until like, oh, I want to retire next year.
Sure. And this is, ExitGuide in many ways is a mission-driven company. The market is huge. So we all know, small business accounts for 35-40% of GDP. But and it's gotten attention lately that, a lot of these businesses are owned by people that are Gen X and baby boomers. So most are over the age of 55 or 60. That means that, 100% of all business owners eventually exit their business.
Mhm.
How they do that, when they do that is sometimes predictable and within their control, and other times it is not. But the reality is it's
Mhm.
going to happen. What we found when I looked at this market and the idea of ExitGuide was, most of them, don't have access to people that are, brokers and M&A advisors and attorneys, simply because they're not big enough for those people to make money off of the transaction. And therefore, good advisors and professionals, they focus on things that are worth 5, 10, 15, $20 million. It makes sense.
Mhm.
But, when small business owners try to do this on their own, over 80% fail when they try to sell their business. And so our
Mhm.
mission is to really, give them the tools and the information so they can start preparing. The analogy I like to draw is, you don't wake up on a Saturday morning and say, let's sell our house and put a sign in the front yard. It sounds funny,
Right.
but think about it. Like, what do?
Mhm.
You look at, you go on a Zillow or a Redfin and you say, okay, what have houses sold for, lately in my area? What things do I need to take care of to give my, house a little more curb appeal and clean it up?
Mhm.
Are there repairs that need to be made? And so you kind of take some time to get the house ready. And, what we find is all too often business owners don't do that same thought process for something that is of similar, possibly even greater value, which is, what is my
Mhm.
business worth? What should I be thinking about? And sometimes to put the things in place could take months, quarters, or years if you want to get the price that you're hoping for. So if you think about it early, you're putting yourself at an advantage. If you're not, you may be putting yourself in a position to either accept what you get or have a real challenge actually selling it. So it's never too early
Mhm.
to start for it. Eventually this day will come.
Right. And I think one of the challenges too, just from my perspective, and I would love to have your insights on this too, is the owner's often that key employee. So if they're going to sell and that they're not there any longer, it makes it harder for someone who wants to maybe buy it but not really operate it the same way to be able to sell it. So how does somebody, figure out that challenge and make it where they're not really the business?
Yeah, and owner dependency is a big thing. A lot of times with service-based businesses. So if you're running an accounting firm or maybe a law firm or something that's service-oriented, the good news is you probably develop a fantastic reputation. Clients really
Hmm.
enjoy working with you. They trust you. But moving somebody into that business who may have a similar skill set does create some uncertainty and doubt. And so, are you the business is one of the questions that we'll ask an owner, which is, look, if the business requires you to spend more than 40 hours a week in it, really 30 hours a week in it, you've got to look at how do you adjust that. Now, this doesn't
Hmm.
include if you love what you do and you've got a team and you've got processes and you've got things in place and you just like working in the business and you're doing a whole variety of things, that is different. So this is a bit
Hmm.
nuanced. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. But if the business cannot run without you, then somebody who's acquiring this may or may not be interested or may not even have the skill set or the licensing, for example, to work in the business day to day. So they've got to replace you. And so that factors into what they are willing to pay for it. Or they may say, look, I don't want to buy a job. I already have a job. I want a business that I can grow and build a team around. So owner
Hmm.
dependency is one of the top things that, not only do you need to consider, but, you're not going to find a replacement for a very active owner within days, weeks, or months. It's probably going to take some time to get that person into the business, which is, again, back to your earlier point, why it's so critical for people to start thinking about this, in advance.
Right. So if someone is thinking, like, I know I don't want to do this forever, I need to be able to retire and enjoy life, and I don't know where to begin. I don't know how to find that person who maybe could come in and start learning or building that team. Like, what would you suggest to them to help them even start the process and what they should be doing to plan for that exit in the long run?
Yeah, and when I started this, one of the questions people would ask is, "Oh, you're going to help them find a buyer? Do you match buyers and sellers?" And it is something that eventually I think we will layer on. But today, when you look at all the data, we've had thousands of people come through our platform. Almost 90% of small business owners have no plan as to when, why, and how they want to exit their business.
Hmm.
And it's a different analogy, but it's like showing up at a financial advisor's office saying, "All right, I want to retire next year. What do I need to do?" Well,
Hmm.
it's going to be really tough. So the things that we offer today are generally focused around an exit plan. So when you come to exitguide.com, what you'll do is you'll take we'll call it a survey, you can call it a quiz, but basically we're asking questions that a professional might ask if they were to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you. Tell me about your financials. Let's talk about owner dependency. What are some of the things in your business that you would like to change to make it more profitable, grow faster? So it's a series of questions. And what we send to you is what we call a sale readiness score. We've all kind of done the FICO, the Experian credit score, if you're going to go buy a home or a car or something like that. It's very similar to that. So it gives the owner a sense of, okay, here's where I am. Now, don't stress about the score, because sometimes it's just a matter of cleaning a few things up. Sometimes it's a little more work. But what we offer is an exit plan. And so for $499, what you're going to get is you're going to get a market-based valuation. You're going to get access to a dashboard that will walk you through the process. So it does personalize if you're trying to sell to an employee versus you're going to try to take your business to market in your local community. And then the information that you enter in the dashboard can be shared with your prospective buyers, but it also will generate, what we refer to as a sale page. So now you've got a web page that you can share with other people that talks about your business, but the information that you've put up there is the right information, and you can get answers to questions, from us as you go through the process about, well, is my narrative, kind of done in the right way? What suggestions do you have for information? So what we're trying to do is say, look, you're likely not experienced with selling a business. Let's help you build a plan. And part of that plan, I like to say, we're giving you tools to do stuff, but at the end of the day, what we're selling is we want to give you confidence that you actually can succeed at this process.
Right. And if someone is thinking, well, I don't think it's going to be for another, 5-10 years. And, I want to start building my staff now, but I don't know, am I going to want to sell it just to some outsider, or am I going to want to sell it to staff, or maybe I have a family member who wants to do it, but, I don't really know that part of the plan yet. What would you recommend to them, still to be moving forward, but maybe not knowing ideally what they're going to do in the long run about who they're selling that to?
Yeah. And in fact, I don't know that anyone has asked me that question on a podcast before, and I love it. Because, this is, I'm not going to state my age, but I'm thinking anybody, if they're watching this by video, they're going to see that I'm probably closer to the retirement age than I am the early career stage. Look, I don't know necessarily when I'm going to retire and what that's going to look like. But my wife and I have done the planning to kind of set aside money so that we can be in a position to do things we want to go do. There's some gaps in what that will look like, but it doesn't mean we're going to say, well, since I don't know that, I'm not going to save. So what you need to think about now is, okay, if you want to sell the business, what does the business need to look like? The business needs to look like it can run with a new owner in place that is not, spending 40 or 50 hours a week in the business unless they want to. You should have a sense of, what is the business worth today? If you want to sell your house and find out that it's less than what you had hoped, well, then you might take time to put in some investment into the property to clean it up, maybe update a few things. Maybe you could add an addition, but it's these things that get the business ready. You need to take yourself out of it and not think about what is it that I want to achieve, which is absolutely important. But what you want to have is, if I want to sell my business for, let's just say, for $2 million, well, what is the business worth today? Okay, what will it take to get it to $2 million? And, what does the team look like to sustain and grow a business if it is worth $2 million to make it worth more? Because that's what somebody who's coming in the door is going to look for. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be great if you have a plan in place, but these things change. We've had people who plan to sell to an employee and a life event has taken that employee out of the mix, and now they're trying to figure out what to do. So it happens, but if you put that structure and foundation in place, you still know, okay, I can no longer take this approach, but I do know what it's worth. I do know that I have something of value, and I'm ready to engage a buyer should they come in and start asking for information and due diligence.
Well, as you were talking, it made me think of like a roadmap, right? Say you're going to travel somewhere and you have it planned out. I'm going to go this direction, but then there's a detour, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you completely toss out the map, right? You still have a plan, but you just have to make some adjustments to it. So at least creating something, right, is the start. And I've been doing this actually in my own business, not because I'm thinking of exiting anytime soon either, but I've been telling my staff, I don't want things to be dependent on me. Like, what if something happens to me, or what if something happens to a family member and I need to step away for a little bit? Like, the company still has to run without me. So we've actually been implementing things in my own company, not because of necessarily like I'm going to exit anytime soon, but it's a wise business practice, right? To be able to have a company run without the owner.
Candy, that's one of the harder things that I see is when somebody who is put in a position for circumstances beyond their control where they have to exit their business.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens. Look, we can't control certain things related to maybe personal issues, health issues, broader economic issues. And when you're caught flat-footed, that is one of the more challenging things because you're probably dealing with a stressful situation to begin with. And then layering on top, what am I going to do with this asset? I've got employees who are now, wondering what to do. Should they look for other jobs? So, please, if you never even go to ExitGuide, just start thinking about this so that you and not just family and yourself, but, you've got employees, you've got responsibilities in the community, you've got customers, you've got vendors, having something in place that you and or somebody who is going to take charge can actually point to and say, okay, we kind of know what we're doing here. So there is 100%, I agree with you. As someone who's in this space, it is one of the harder, I love talking to business owners and when they're excited about the next chapter in their life. It's hard talking to someone when they say, well, I'm in this position, and you're trying to kind of help them focus on the things that they need to go do. And they've got distractions. So you're smart for doing this. Every owner should be thinking about this. I mean, an exit plan can mean different things, but as you're pointing to, even a contingency plan, should something unfortunate happen to you, at a minimum, just get stuff down on paper and out of your head so that someone else can pick it up and say, okay, I know where the bank accounts are. I know where everything else is.
Mm-hmm. So from your experience too, like what are some of the misconceptions maybe that entrepreneurs have about having an exit plan for their business? And, maybe they think something's going to happen a certain way, and that's a misconception. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is hard is, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, I understand this. People have a vision of what their business potential is. And it doesn't mean it's not accurate, but it's very hard to translate to someone else who's just looking at 3 years of P&L statements, a balance sheet, and other things. And they'll say, but it's a great business. Well, that may be, but the numbers kind of have to line up for that. And then there also has to be something that says, okay, I've not made these investments in marketing or expansion of my store, whatever it may be. So one of the misconceptions is, an owner operator who's knee deep in the business and has been for a while, sure, they have an emotional attachment to it, but they can foresee somebody coming in and making investments and doing these things. And you really have to outline that for someone and then really kind of have some data that supports it. If you're going to say like we've grown at 12% over the past 5 years, and if someone were just to do this one thing, it's going to grow at 75% year over year the next couple of years. I mean, it's pretty hard to sell. So understanding, where your business is today and what a new owner could do with it is really something that you're going to have to kind of walk them through. So when people are entering information into their dashboard, into their sell sheet, one of the things we try to drive them to do is start thinking about, you've got to tell the story of what makes the business special today, but you also have to explain to someone with some supporting data what the business could be and what the opportunity is for them.
Mm-hmm. So what about if somebody is going to sell to an outsider? They might be thinking too, like, I got the check, we're done, I'm out of the business, versus maybe an investor's thinking the owner is going to stay too. So like, how do they navigate that, like that plan of how long should the owner actually think that they're still going to need to be involved before that transition is done?
Sorry. Yeah. One of the questions we ask in our sale readiness survey is, are you willing to stay for a transition period? And for those who may go to ExitGuide and take it, the right answer is yes. In unless there's unique circumstances, and it's something that needs to be part of the upfront conversation. So when you engage a prospective buyer, what are you looking for the business? Okay, I'm looking for this amount of money. How will this get financed? Right? Does the buyer have the money to pay for this? But a good buyer is probably going to come in and say, look, depending on the business, I would like a transition period. Now, it can look like you can be packaged in different ways, but generally speaking, at least a couple of weeks, oftentimes as long as a few months. A bigger business might want somebody to stay on for a year or more. We don't see that as much because we tend to focus on businesses worth less than 5 million, because that's where the big market need is. So, you should be prepared to invest some time in helping ensure a smooth transition. And, depending on how the deal is structured, an owner probably will put some type of contract or agreement in place. You might stay on as a W-2 employer. You might be a 1099 employee. And they're going to say, look, you're going to be here for this amount of time for these types of deliverables subject to renewal. And, I hear from some owners like, hey, after, 60 days, it kind of tapered off a bunch. I was really busy just talking to employees and customers and vendors, just that this is going to be good. And once that went away, he or she's got a pretty good grasp of the business. Other times they're like, look, we're getting there, but everybody wants the business to succeed long term. But you are probably going to be in a transition period, and it's something you need to really think about as part of your exit strategy.
Mm-hmm. And what about the financing? I mean, you briefly touched on there's different financing things too, but can you talk maybe the pros and cons of maybe being paid outright versus having payments over time? Those kind of things. I'm sure a lot of people don't even think about the pros and cons, but that would be a big part of it.
It in many respects, it's the most important part of it, which is, and we see this sometimes with an employee who is very earnest about wanting to buy a business, and then suddenly they say, well, I don't have $1 million. So there's different ways to structure this. One is SBA 7A loans. And we're not a broker. We do have a network of professionals that we can refer people to for things like bookkeeping and SBA brokers, SBA program brokers. What a SBA lender is looking for is they're looking for, basically, some commitment from the buyer. It could be, using a home or property or something as collateral and some type of cash down. But what they want to know is, in addition to the finances, is this person capable of running this business so that the proceeds can come back to pay down the loan? So you don't have to be rich. You don't necessarily have to have, a huge sum of money to put down. But if an SBA lender can say, well, Candy's worked in this business for the past 10 years as a general manager, and we've talked to her and she clearly knows the business. So she might not be able to put a lot down, but she's going to run this thing really well. Now, what happens in most cases, probably more than 80%, is what's known as seller financing. And that's where basically the seller is going to say, okay, we've looked at the numbers, we've agreed on this price. You're going to pay me from proceeds from the business over this period of time. And there's generally going to be, a loan agreement in place, and that loan is going to include interest. And someone's going to say, okay, I'm going to pay you X dollars per month, per quarter. It could be on an annualized basis. And so that gets wrapped into the agreement. Seller financing is very common. Maybe SBA lending against a portion, 20, 30, 50% of the value of the business, with seller financing taking care of the rest, is really common. And in some cases, SBA can, come in and finance the whole thing. Generally speaking, at this end of the market, you're going to find that a lot of seller financing and then maybe some seller financing with an SBA loan to carry a portion of it. But at the end of the day, especially when we find, people, thinking about selling it to a relative, there's a lot of desire to kind of make this work and earnestness around, preserving the family legacy. But one of the first questions I tell owners is, look, have this conversation up front, because intent doesn't always match reality. Make sure that they have a way to pay for this. And if they don't, you need to work on that. And if that can't happen, then don't invest the time and energy in this process just yet, because what you'll find is you'll waste a lot of time and some money trying to get things in order when the deal is never going to happen.
Right. So I know there's so much more, to this topic as well, but I know we are going to be coming close to the end of the time we have together. So I would love to ask you if you have an offer. I know you've talked a little bit about this survey, so that might be it. But if you have the offer you want to extend to our listeners, and how they can contact you if they want to ask additional questions.
Yes. So we sell an exit plan for $499. We will give 20% off to your listeners. Just email me. It's Eric with a C at ExitGuide.com. So it's ERIC. for those that didn't get Eric, at exitguide.com. Just email me, mention the show, and I'd be happy to send you a code for getting a discount on our exit plan. And an exit plan is something that might take some time to create up front, but this is a SaaS model. So, you can keep it there just for a nominal annual renewal fee, and it may be something that you go back to and you make adjustments. So we've designed this so that, once you put that upfront work and spend a couple $100 creating a plan, if you want to kind of renew that, maybe down the road, you want to share it with a financial advisor, you want to share it with your CPA, or you want to just come back to it and make adjustments, then absolutely, we think that's the right way for a business owner to approach this. So we just charge an additional, recurring fee on an annualized basis, but get started. And, again, it's Eric at exitguide.com. Just mention the show and we'll give you 20% off that.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Eric, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I think it's very informative, and I'm sure that the listeners also appreciated the tips that you shared.
Great. Candy, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it, and hope this does help a couple of people.
Perfect. And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes.
Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.